Good afternoon and welcome to the final installment of a three-part series brought to you by City AI Orange County. We're really happy to have all of you joining us here today. A little background on City AI Global. Since its inception, the organization has engaged over 26,000 AI industry professionals with the help of 200 volunteer ambassadors. Before we get started, we'd like to thank all of our ambassadors for their help in putting this series together, as well as our diamond sponsor, Technosis, who has been instrumental in bringing City AI to Orange County. Okay, and today we're going to be featuring three distinguished Orange County companies, each of whom is doing something unique in the AI space: Veritone, CloudVerga, and Cyrano.ai. Along the way, we're going to be taking questions from you, our audience, so please be ready. Last month, we explored challenges and opportunities associated with the adoption of new solutions in light of our current landscape. Today, we're going to be pushing this theme a little bit further as we talk to companies who are using AI solutions to address opportunities in the mental health, energy, security, and mortgage lending space. Now, this webinar is going to be divided into three distinct segments, where we're going to discuss a specific company and then open it up to you for questions. So as you think of a question, please put that in the chat box to the right of your screen, and we'll address those as we go after each segment. In addition to our featured companies, City AI Ambassador Joseph Hopkins of the iPrestige Emerge Fund is going to be on hand, taking and giving questions on what he sees trending in the investment space as it relates to artificial intelligence. He's also, by the way, the gentleman who fathered this entire series, so we have a big thanks to him for all of his help in doing that. With that, let's get started. Joining us now is Al Brown. He is the Senior Vice President of Engineering, Data Science, and Architecture for Veritone. Al, thank you so much for joining us.
It is my pleasure for being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, of course, come on. You're also one of our ambassadors at City AI, and I've got to tell the folks who are watching as well, you were instrumental in putting this series on. So thank you again for your help with that.
My pleasure. So AI is something I care very much about, and I'm very happy to be part of this initiative.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Before we jump into the thick of this, Al, I got to ask you, you guys were in Times Square last week? Tell us about that.
We were, and so we've actually had a quite a successful run so far with applying our AI technology towards energy. And we have a utility that we're working with on the East Coast that we're actually helping them optimize really their solar and battery to actually reduce costs and provide power much more efficiently. In fact, you can hear our CEO, Chad Steelberg, talk about how our technology can actually help solve the California blackouts that have been happening.
Wow, well, we would love that. Actually, all of us would. But tell us more. So you guys were in Times Square last week, and you were actually powering a microgrid. Is that right?
So we were in Times Square, and if you were there at the time, and I'm sure you'll see the picture, our solution was actually on the big screen at Times Square, and so you could see it, and it was awesome to get that coverage and recognition of doing great things.
Well, this is cool, and it's great for all of us to have a publicly traded company here in Irvine, California. Very cool stuff. AIware. Now, this is the world's first operating system focused on artificial intelligence. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And so when we started Veritone, we really wanted to build a company that makes it very easy to pull content in, run it through AI, and do something with it, right? Make it really easy to apply AI to solve the world's problems. And we started thinking about it, much like how, and I'm going to use the term computational operating system, so Mac OS and Windows and others, how they work. When you build a program and you're trying to write to the hard drive, you don't care if it was built by IBM or Fujitsu or Western Digital down the street. It's just a hard drive. The operating system provides the same API, the same access to all that technology on the covers, no matter whether it's an SSD or a spinning disk, that type of thing. And so what we've done is apply the same approach to AI. And so now, as part of AIware, We support 13 plus different cognitive categories, including transcription, face recognition, object detection, and others. We have a single common API for all of those categories, and we have the same common data output format. So whether or not you want to use, let's just use logo detection, whether you want to use Amazon or Google or Microsoft or two guys from Kiev, they all act and behave the same way. You can run them in parallel, you can actually process them. And that, at a heart, is what AIware is built around. Now, AIware actually has two main components that really kind of power this operating system. The first is what we call core, and core is really our catalog of where we collect all the content. We provide multi-dimensional search, temporal-based, so time-based search. So I can actually go back and say, show me all the city AI calls where Al is talking with Sam about AIware, for example, and we'll pull back within seconds every single instance where both of us are there that are recognized, as well as all the topics that we're talking about. And so it's very powerful, and you can search across all of the different cognitive categories there, including geolocation and structured data. So that's our main piece, the called core. And then we have what we call edge, which is really our transactional piece. And that purpose is really taking in content, running it through predefined AI pipelines, which can be very complex or very simple. And it does it at scale. And then it does something with the output, which is typically sending it to core. So overall, that is AIware. All of this is exposed through APIs. It can run on-prem or in the cloud, and it can be run as a managed service. And that's the basis for all of our solutions that we bring to market.
Okay, so this is an interesting piece. We mentioned it can be run on-prem or in the cloud. Why is that so important? I know that you have multiple industries that you guys are serving. Tell us a little bit more about that for those who are watching today.
Absolutely. When you're talking about an operating system and the ability to build applications that can run anywhere, whether you want to run in the cloud as a web application, or you want to run in-prem, which is maybe more of a thick client, or a web application behind a firewall, it's very important to be able to have all the infrastructure work where you want it to work, when you want it to work. And so we have customers that are using our systems for transcription, translation, among others, face recognition, logo detection, that where the content is so sensitive that it really can't leave their networks, and sometimes their networks can't even touch the public internet. And we have commercial customers as well as government customers that have requirements similar to those. And so that's why it's so important to be able to run it wherever you want. And the other thing that's really powerful about AIware is it's one command to install it, and I can run it on a single laptop. And if I need more horsepower, I just run the same command on multiple computers around me, and they actually join that same AIware instance or cluster, and you just have more processing. So if you're processing content and you have 10 people in a conference room, you can all run the command on your laptop, and all of a sudden you have a cluster of 10 people or 10 computers running and processing your content.
Wow, okay. Okay, so that really kind of covers the premise behind, or the foundation behind AIware. Tell us a little bit about Automate Studio. That's a component that you guys have developed very specifically, I believe, for studio purposes, correct?
Yeah, so Automate Studio is our low-code solution for really how do we script and make it easy to process content and handle events in our system. And so it's built on top of Node-RED, which came out of IBM for IoT. It has integrations into over 2,000 different systems. So it can connect to anything you want. We have the ability to very quickly, just basically through a visual workflow editor, drag out all the steps that you want, connect it to all the different systems, and literally within a half hour or so, integrate AI into some back-end system through Automate Studio. And so it's really designed for business analysts as well as the IT heroes to actually very easily and quickly start adding in artificial intelligence of any type into their applications.
So, okay, now you mentioned something interesting there. Artificial intelligence of any type. Tell us about the types. What exactly does that mean?
So there's a lot of different types of AI. And artificial intelligence has been around for a while. And we started off when I was back in school, I won't tell you when, but we had neural nets, but very small ones. And that's grown quite a lot with the different styles now, like GAN and others. And we have data analytics or data analysis we did before, such as logistics regressions. And so what we're doing by different types is really the different types of cognition. So do I want object detection or face detection or logo detection or transcription? Do I want to process audio? Do I want to process video? Do I want to run structured data analysis? Do I want to do more of the advanced AI optimization that we're doing with the energy sector? Those are what I mean by the different types of AI.
Now you talk a little bit about, I know Veritone has a few other subset products. I believe it's Veritone Identify, Redact, and Illuminate. Can you tell us a little bit more about those three?
Absolutely. So you're getting into, let me just take a step back. Veritone really has three main business units. AIware is the first business unit, which is focused on enterprise software. The second and third business units are media entertainment and government and legal and compliance, otherwise known as GLC. GLC is really, has a few different products that are actually helping local police stations do their job more efficiently without breaking privacy. And so if you look at Identify is a product that some of the local agencies around us, as well as the rest of the US, are actually using to help detectives do their job faster. And what it really does is when a crime is committed, a user, they will actually get video of the evidence of what happened if they have video. And if they do have video, they can add it to Identify, where we'll go through, take all the faces, they'll select the faces of interest of the suspects, and then we will compare that face to their known offender database, which is basically the list of people that have been arrested over the last period of time. And if they have access to the other agencies around them, then we'll also run it against their known offender list as well. When detectives are investigating a crime, the first thing they do is they look for people who have already been arrested in the past. And that's the known offender database. And so what we do is we just rank everybody from here's the most likely to the least likely. And what we do with that is we really just give them that list. And then it's the detective's job to really say, I'm not interested, I'm not interested. Okay, I want to talk to this person, I want to go talk to this person, and then start really doing the investigation. All we're doing there is really cutting out the legwork against the people that have already been arrested in their system, which is great because I really want the police officers actually doing their job rather than flipping through Polaroid books. The next one, which is Redact, is on the freedom of information side. And so right now it takes a police officer about 8 hours to edit a 5-minute video to basically use Adobe Premiere to go frame by frame and block out all of the faces, which is just insane. I do not want to pay police officers personally to do things like this. I'd like to give them tools that help them be effective and help making sure everybody's held accountable for their actions. And so what this one does, Redact, you upload a video, you can process that video through and select all the faces. So you can actually select license plates, you can select ID cards and computer screens, and we'll automatically redact all of it. And then that way, the real workflow for the police officer then is the review side. And if we miss something, they just go back quickly, circle it, and then when they're happy that everything's caught, they hit burn. And then that produces a video that can be given to the defense, it can be given publicly, that type of thing. So I'm very happy with that we're actually helping make it much easier for everybody to be transparent. And that's what the Redact product does. We also have a Translate app, which really just translates documents, typically for legal cases, from one language to another.
When you say one, so we're talking about foreign languages, or are we talking about technology languages? What kind of
We're talking about foreign languages.
Okay,
so,
good.
Languages like Thai or Korean into English or English into Korean, that type of thing.
That's amazing. There's a lot of use cases there for sure. So let's move into clarity. I know AIware, and we're kind of jumping around a little bit, Al, but one of the things that kind of resonated with me was, you want to have metrics in place to assess the effectiveness of your AI, of the tools. And I believe Clarity does that, correct?
Correct. And so Clarity is our tool to really provide visibility into the biases of AI models against your particular data set. And so I'll just pick an example. Everyone's familiar with this, which is face recognition. Face recognition works pretty well when it's broadcast quality like this. I'm facing the camera, you have my full face here. That's the easiest scenario. But if you're doing it against a surveillance camera, for example, or you're dealing with it in more of a live scenario where people are moving, maybe the lighting is different, these algorithms don't work as well. And so what Clarity does, it allows you to really define your data set of here's all my inputs, here's all the pictures, or here's all of the images that I actually want to go process. Here's all the faces on them, and here's how I've actually labeled all of this content. We then allow you to actually take that content and then run it through any number of AI services. We call them engines, but they're really AI services. And that could be Amazon, Google, it could be your own algorithm, it could be ours. And then you can actually compare and see which one actually is more accurate. And then you can start looking at it to say, for example, if you're looking at face, you can actually start creating data sets around ethnicity or different lighting styles, things like that, to actually start seeing where the bias is, which ones do they actually catch more frequently and which ones do they not catch. And that's the Clarity product. And really the whole goal of that product and how our customers are using it is to provide visibility into how that AI model works and behaves now, as well as how does it change over time. So if you are using a SaaS service for AI, such as Google, they're changing it constantly. How do you know that the accuracy that you got when you rolled out the project is the accuracy you're getting right now when you're actually using it? And so it's not just at the beginning stage, but also as your data changes or as actually the service changes as well, you want to keep reevaluating continuously the level of accuracy that you're getting so that you know what to improve.
Wow, that's a big piece to really kind of bite into, because again, there are so many variables to this equation, obviously. And it sounds like, my guess is your technology roadmap is ever changing, Al. I can only imagine.
We have a pretty robust roadmap. It's pretty fun.
That's pretty cool. So let's move into energy. That's the big new push for Veritone. Tell us a little bit more about your energy solutions and where you see this going.
Yeah, so great topic. And one of the things that I am personally excited about is how we're actually helping make energy easy and sufficient and really leverage renewables in a way that makes sense for our country and for our population. What we're doing with energy is we actually acquired a company about 2 years ago called Arbitrage. And at part of Arbitrage was Wolf Cohn. He's a doctor, a double PhD from MIT. He taught at UW or University of Washington for 25 years. He now teaches at Stanford. And he's our chief data scientist around this topic. And this optimization, this advanced AI, is really based on Hamiltonians and how do we actually optimize the competing demands for generation as well as battery health and how much irradiation is coming. So we actually forecast how much power the sky is going to produce so that we can have better information to optimize where the energy flows are coming from. And we're doing this to really, increase the battery life itself so that we keep the battery within tolerance in terms of heat so it doesn't blow up or at worst damage itself. Well, blow up's probably the worst part. But and so we're seeing great success. We have a project on the East Coast that's going out right now. And I'm super excited by this. I just got solar panels and a battery from Tesla at my house. So I'm super excited to try this at home and see how it works.
Love that. Love that. So can you tell us a little bit more? I know that this is still in that early phase. Can you give us a little bit of a preview as to what's next on this? You know, you have the project that you're working on the East Coast. I know it's been fairly hush hush, so we don't want to push you, but just kind of curious for our listeners today.
Yeah, so the project on the East Coast is really balancing a pretty large solar array with a pretty large battery array so that the utility customer can do a better job of spinning up old fossil fuels generators. So that way they can keep the costs down. So if they know exactly what's going to happen 30 minutes to 6 hours ahead of time of what the batteries and the solar panels will actually do, then they can do a much better job on the fossil fuel side, on the generation side there to actually meet their balancing authority. So that's what we're doing there. We have other projects upcoming around arbitrage. Because again, it's all about optimization. How do you actually pick the goals you want to optimize? And then how do you take everything and then keep it all within constraints? And that's what that AI technology is based on.
So tell us some more about the arbitrage projects. That does sound interesting.
So there are a couple of types of arbitrage projects. One of them is around energy. And it's, if you look more in the Midwest, you have, in one particular state, you have 2,000 different energy providers. You can become a virtual power plant. And you can buy energy from certain providers out of 2,000, and then you can deliver that energy back to the grid through contracts. And so really that play there is really just arbitrage between how cheaply can you buy from the different providers, how much do you actually have to provide. If you know that, you'd be perfect. And then how much you have to provide for the balancing authority. And that's really where the arbitrage is coming in. The other side of that is we're enabling also what's called virtual power plants, which is a collection of about 3,000 plus homes in California that have solar and battery to actually be a power plant.
Amazing.
And so then once you get enough of those, you can actually become kind of utility and start really selling the energy that's being generated. And so I'm actually very excited by that one.
That's huge. That is.
But all of these are potentially in the works, no signed deals. So these are just things that we're exploring with this optimization technology.
Okay. And tell us again, I know you've got a robust roadmap. Are there any sneak peeks onto what the journey ahead looks like?
So what the journey ahead looks like is really focusing more on how to actually deliver AIware as a turnkey solution. So right now we have Edge is running on premise. You're going to see the whole stack and make it very easy to build applications, AI solutions on our stack, running on-prem, on your laptop, wherever you want. That's in the short term. Others, we have additional products that will be coming out soon that focus on really how do you leverage cameras, whether in a personal setting or in a corporate setting, to actually push your intelligence further into those devices so that the environment around you can adapt based on how you want it to be. For example, one of the demos we've done, and this is just a demo, but we've done in our front lobby, is when select people walk in, the camera will recognize us and then it'll unlock the door, right? So it starts changing its behavior because it knows I am there, and it says, okay, if Al's here and no one else is around, then I should just make it easier and unlock the door. And so there are projects like those that you'll see in our roadmap upcoming.
Oh, that's amazing. I love this. Well, Al, this has been super amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. And really, we're excited to see what's next for you and Veritone, and again, City AI and your involvement there.
Thank you. I'm excited as well. And thank you for the time and having me on City AI.
Hi, Al. Good to see you again. How are
I
you?
am good. It's great to see you again as well, Sam.
Good, good. Well, thank you. It looks like we've got some questions from folks who are curious about that energy piece we were talking about. Somebody had asked, what are the next steps to getting the energy program launched? I'm not sure how much you can openly share about that, since you did give us a little bit of a preview last week, but based on how things are changing ever quickly in the world right now.
Absolutely. So I can't really share too much more, but we are in trials underway with this technology. And as that goes successfully, we will be rolling out more information on it.
Okay, good. And you had mentioned that you've been doing some testing at your house.
Yes, my wife
right
is
now.
actually accusing me of walking around with the app and saying, this is costing too much power, turn it off. But it's actually great having the panels and the power wall here.
Oh, that's funny. So walk us through what that looks like, actually, if you don't mind, if you can. I'm not sure, again, how much of this is top.
Well, I haven't actually started testing our technology yet. So we just got solar and the Powerwall recently, so within the last week. But it's more of just been using the Tesla app itself and the information that we get from it to actually see how the energy is being used within the house. So.
Very nice, very nice. Well, good. Well, this is exciting stuff, Al. We really appreciate this as always, and always great.
It's always great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So joining us now is Scott Sandlin. He is the co-founder and CEO of Cyrano.ai. Scott, great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining City AI.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us, it's funny, we read a little bit about your bio. You are also a thought leader in artificial empathy. Tell us about that. What exactly is that?
So the idea that right now existing chat systems and most artificial intelligence systems are optimized for complete information transmission or accurate response, like a frequently asked question system, but they're not paying attention to effective communication strategy and paying attention to the other person's experience. And so the idea of artificial empathy is about optimizing for the mental states and emotional states of the end human user.
Okay, interesting. So tell us, so if we can kind of thread the needle here between this
Sure.
artificial empathy piece and what you're doing at Cyrano. Tell us a little bit about that genesis and how this whole thing came to be.
Well, yeah, so it actually started when I was the CEO and executive director of a mental health clinic. So we were working a lot with at-risk teens, at-risk adolescents, drug addicted adolescents and people under 30. And we had a fairly big team. There was 10 or 12 of us seeing a bunch of clients. And after a couple of years, I really felt like we were just getting to the people too late. And by the time we were trying to help somebody, their life was already significantly worse than it used to be. And I just felt like we needed to get upstream from that and start preventing problems more than trying to treat them. And so I just kind of had this moment one day where I was kind of overwhelmed by that feeling of, damn it, we're getting there too late. And all these people could have been helped if we could figure out how to do that. And as luck, I'll say, would have it, there also happened to be a school shooting that day. And so I was at lunch with a friend of mine who's now a co-founder at Cyrano. And we just happened to be seeing on the TV a school shooting. While we were talking about this, we're getting there too late. And he said, what's crazy is every time there's a school shooting, the kids pull out their phones and they film these dangerous scenarios because they trust their phone to be more powerful than they are. And they send out tweets and they send out Facebook updates and they send out text messages to their family. And they're using this tool when their life is literally in danger. If we could figure out a way to grab that feeling, we could help more people. And that was the aha moment for me. And I sort of shifted and I looked at, suicide is the second leading cause of death in America under 24 years old. It's this huge epidemic, which is why I started the clinics. And I want to build tools that are scalable, and just hiring more, therapists or life coaches or hypnotists or anything like that. That's not as good as building an AI that could be emotionally intelligent, that could be really present, that could ask you about your mental and emotional states and approach your conversation strategically. And so we built out Cyrano with that endeavor in mind, knowing that we have to build commercial applications first for a lot of ethical reasons. But the idea of building a world-class therapist, building a truly intelligent AI, not generalized intelligence, of course not, but in the same way that you can optimize it for chess or poker or cheating in the World Series, you could build a robot to help a person who's had a bad day. And that's what we've set out to do.
So you talked about, and if you don't mind, build on this piece about strategically using this AI to kind of move this forward.
Yeah, so Cyrano is all about words. So it's based on the name Cyrano is Cyrano de Bergerac, which if people haven't seen the play, there's a Steve Martin movie where he's got a big nose and he falls in love with Daryl Hannah. That's the story of Cyrano de Bergerac. And our AI is built on that because we're all about words and language and the power of strategic words and effective communication. And so what we've built is a system that pays attention to the words and phrases people use in context and to pay attention to the option value of the words and the strategic value of the words, in the same way that you can with chess, where you can say, okay, this piece can do these types of things. And in the presence of these pieces, the strategy gets more nuanced. We're doing that with words and phrases so that our system can generate replies to a conversation the same way an AI can generate counter moves in a chess match.
So how are you attributing those values? I mean, you mentioned that each word and phrase has a set value. I know you have, but the commercial application has been up and running and doing quite well for quite some time. Kudos to you guys. And then you're going to move into the mental health space as well. Tell us a little bit more about how you're thinking through those values and what that looks like.
Sure. So Cyrano currently measures words in dozens of categories, depending on the specificity of the deployment, up to 80. But in most cases, just dozens. And then there's hundreds or thousands of words in any category. And we think about what's going on in that category. So an example of a category we use is logic. And so there are words that indicate a person is applying logic to a conversation. Words like if, then, because, so, words like that. And each of those words, it's not yes or no, it's in there. It's scored on a scale of 0 to 1 so that you can add just more specificity after the decimal. So we measure words in like 3 or 4 digits past the decimal. And so the word so could be a value of, I'm making this up, but 0.5. And because could be 0.06. And then phrases happen as well. And so what we're doing is we're measuring each word in its category. And then we can say word, sentence, context, full conversation. We can start measuring how much, in this case, logic and rational thought is being applied to the conversation. And then compare that to other conversations, and then compare that to all the other categories that we're paying attention to, and seeing the ranked order and how these strategies and priorities in communication are being applied by the human side. And I mean, that is what's going on in a chess match. You say, oh, this person's being aggressive, this person's playing defense, this person's going for these moves, and the AI can see that because of what all the pieces on the board are doing. And right now, most chat systems aren't trying to do that. They're going after keyword search. And so they're only paying attention to a small fraction of the pieces on the board and the moves that are being played. And so when you try to figure out how to respond and play a better chess match, they don't have enough pieces labeled. And so really our value proposition is we're labeling more of the pieces and labeling them in concert, the way we did with chess. We're just doing that linguistically.
So are you building essentially right now, Scott, a database of these phrases and words so that the AI can now kind of predict where somebody might be thinking or how they're feeling or what's triggering a decision?
Yes. And so right now, like we said, we're doing this in commercial applications first. And the reason for that is ethics. Our goal is to help people who are in vulnerable populations. Think teens in crisis, think post-trauma survivors, think Veterans Affairs. These are people who need these tools deployed at scale, and they can have it with them wherever they are, whenever they need it. But there's no reason I would want to train my system on those people. I do not want to be at 60 or 70 or even 80% confident when I'm going to those people. I mean, the high stakes of those conversations and the ethics in those conversations push me away from doing that. And so right now, anybody who's doing that kind of AI therapy is doing a very on rails, very strict chatbot. And I think that's a dead end. And I could be wrong, but that's our philosophy. And so what we decided to do was go to sales and customer service, a place where there's a lower threshold for taking risks. There's a more level playing field of the people involved. And there's clear outcomes of this worked and this didn't work. This went well, this didn't. And we can keep stress testing and pushing our system and keep making it better and better, so that once we get good enough at amassing this data set that we're currently doing and training and refining our models, by the time we move it over to the mental health and social good aspects, we have a system that we can trust. And there'll still be safeguards and all that once we do that. But that's sort of the crawl, walk, run of how we approach this.
Fantastic. And that makes sense too. I mean, even based on our conversation before we started rolling today. So tell us about the commercial applications now. So if I am a salesperson looking to connect with Cerna, what does that look like? And how am I using your technology to further my process and connect a little bit more effectively with the folks that I'm serving?
So the easiest thing about our technology is our goal is to just plug into all existing tech. So right now we're on Zoom and we're in the Zoom marketplace. And if you use our Zoom tool, there are 0 buttons you ever have to push. You just get an emailed report after every call that just tells you about the people that are on the call. And so you don't have to remember to do anything or change anything, and you're not going to be distracted in the moment. It gives you after the fact, here's how this call went, here's what they were like, here's what they care about, here's how to follow up, and here's the lifetime value of that relationship, what you need to do to strengthen that bond. And we have other modules about mentorship or conflict resolution and a bunch of other things, but our system generates those. So we built the Zoom tool one just to kind of show people how it worked in response to COVID, and just gave it away and have, we're processing well over 1 million minutes every month of calls now, of just people using the tool and telling us it's helping them, telling us that it's enriching their relationships when they're using it personally, and absolutely adding value to their business side when they're doing sales calls or customer service calls, anything like that. So that's an example, but our tool's an API, and our go-to-market is partnerships and integration. So we will plug in to a Twilio or a Ytel or a Zendesk or a whoever that might be, or Zoom, Microsoft Teams, et cetera. And we just plug into that and just become a feature in existing software with existing customers.
Okay. Wow. So as we're having this conversation, so if you can, because we want to show folks who are tuning in right now the demonstration of how your product actually works. What's happening? We're recording this in the background. How does it work right now, Scott?
So what our system is doing is taking the transcript of the call. So we're not looking at tonality, pitch, or the waveform, even though that's really valid stuff. We're just not doing it. And we're not looking at visual cues like pupil dilation or nodding or any of that. We're not doing that. That's great stuff. Someone else is doing it. We're looking at the words. And because we're looking at words, we can be in email or LinkedIn or Facebook Messenger or wherever. But in this case, we're in the transcript of this conversation that you and I are having. So what our system is doing is taking every word and deciding which category each word goes in based on our pre-trained language models. And some words go in multiple categories, and some words don't go into any category, but most words do. And all the words get tallied up, and it creates this multi-dimensional cloud for every sentence and every utterance, which is us taking turns. I'm saying multiple sentences in a row here. So every sentence, every utterance, and then the whole conversation overflow. So over the axis of time, you can see this cloud of me and this cloud of you, and we see these clouds moving in multidimensional space. And based on where those clouds are, we can say, oh, Sam is in the ballpark of a person who will buy a car today. Or Sam is in the ballpark of a person who will test drive a car but never actually buy it. And if we want her to move to this area, which we call likely to purchase, what we need to do is add X, Y, and Z, which is the chess of this, to move you through a couple mental states to get there. So we might say, sure, you're using logic, and sure, you're saying desire, but you're not mentioning any need or commitment. So right now your commitment is low and your needs are low. That's not a person who's going to pull the trigger. That's a person who's going to, continue in research. And that means in this metaphor, I'm the salesperson. I can see that, and I can prioritize or deprioritize what strategies I want to use with you. And so right now we're aiding humans so that humans can be better at their job. And ultimately we build tools that can augment and then replace humans at certain stages along the way.
So when you look at that sales cycle, where does this fall into that?
So the key to what we're building is it's not about transaction. It can do that, but that's really limiting. We really look at lifetime value of that relationship with that customer. It's one of those things where if car dealerships want that customer, just using it as an example again, car dealerships want that person to buy their next 3 cars with you, not just this one. And so if we can say, here's how you market to this person, here's what their priorities are, here's what their values are, here's the ad campaign that would work with them or not. Or if you're talking about an insurance broker or a loan officer or anything like that, you say, hey, you've made a big decision to work with me on something that was really important. And now I have this information about you that's going to help us trust each other. And so the data privacy of this is really important. And the ethics of this are really important. So one of the things that slows our go-to-market is being very mindful about who we're partnering with and where this stuff goes. But it's really that. It's about that long-term relationship. It's about understanding more and more about this person, the same way that Amazon does, where Amazon says, if you shop for these things and you've bought this thing, you're going to want to look at these other things next. So previous behavior is an indicator of future behavior. Words are a behavior, and speech is a behavior pattern. And so what we're doing is creating a tool that can say, people who say this, do that. And if you want them to do this, do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't want them to do that, do A, B, and C. And so we can increase or decrease the likelihood that the person follows through.
So who's the perfect customer right now for you? I know, given that you are in that commercial application space.
The perfect customer for me, like big picture, the perfect customer for me is the Teen Crisis Hotline or Veterans Affairs. Those are my dream customers. And we built this to help those organizations that are already deployed, that already have all the resources, that already have all the things and they're doing great. And we just say, hey, here's another tool. Let's just add one ability. Let's increase your feature set and resources by this. So that's a great customer for us. Other customers that would be great for us, in terms of, again, dream perfect customers, are people who are already integrated well into a CRM and want this feature plugged into that CRM. So whether that's Salesforce or anything else, being able to add this as just a tab, a plugin, and that's all it is. And now all of a sudden, without having to open new software or remember a new password or anything like that, you're just getting the information that you wish you had. And that, by the way, the best salespeople already intuitively have. This is just helping the middle of that bell curve, most people who aren't super salesmen with, decades of experience. This is just for, the person who will act on good advice and isn't catching everything, because no one does. There's a couple companies that, people watching this are thinking, well, how is this different than Gong or Chorus? Or, those are two, the 800-pound gorillas in this. And we're very different from them. They're great at what they're doing. And what they're building is dashboards for sales managers to review and to create accountability and to help, which is great. And they're looking at sort of as many objective things as they can. And we're really looking at as many subjective things as we can. And there's that nuance. And that's the artificial empathy and emotional intelligence, rather than just how many times did they say the name of our products, how many times did they say the name of the customer's products, who interrupted who. We're looking at something deeper than that. And so being able to give the insights that say, hey, this is the kind of person that if you tell them you're going to do something and then you don't do it, you lose them. Or this is the kind of person that needs tons of details and facts to support any claim you're making. Or this is the kind of person who never wants those. And if you give them homework, they'll never talk to you again. And this is a person who makes decisions based on ego, or this person makes it based on relationships. And it gives really actionable bullet point what to do about it. So right now our system does a thing called natural language generation. So it creates sentences. And today it will create sentences that have never been written by us. And it puts out new sentences every day. And right now our system creates somewhere around 24, 28 billion different email reports based on what's going on and all the different variables that it's tracking. And then it takes that and turns it into really simple sentences.
Wow. Okay, I'm having a hard time putting my head around that. That's a lot of
It's a
reports.
lot, yeah.
And the system itself is synthesizing all of that data and
Right.
creating something very, very specific and actionable, like you just mentioned. Okay.
Yeah, like do this, don't do that. Like for our live version of this, for like customer service and call centers, we make it 3, do this, 2, don't do that, and 1, here's how to upsell. So it's 6 bullet points, and each bullet point is less than 10 words. So it's really, really short, it's really specific, and it's hopefully actionable.
So given where we are today in our new world, right, the last 6 months or so, I've got to believe you guys have been incredibly busy. As more
Yeah.
and more people are on Zoom and trying to have these connections with prospects or existing customers, tell us a little bit about what the last 6 months have looked like for you guys.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So we brought on, a year ago, we brought on a guy named Ryan Huff, who was the CEO of a company called Cirrus Insights that was at one time #1 in the Salesforce App Exchange. And we brought him in because our tech was ready for someone like that. And he was coming in to operationalize, productize, and really take us to market. And it took us a couple of months to get, our ducks in a row and get on the same page and get a plan and do all those things. And we did. And then we spent about 6 months building out that pipeline, creating those relationships. And right as we were about to turn the corner and start getting contracts signed, we were in procurement and all those things, COVID hit and shut down everything we were doing, like a lot of us. And so our entire deal flow pipeline just turned off that month or that week. And so we said, okay, we need to do something. We could just sit and wait out COVID. And, rumor has it, it's only going to be 2 to 8 weeks. But we said, no, we're not going to wait. And I'm really glad we didn't. We said, everyone seems to be going on Zoom. Let's just build the Zoom tool. So we built the Zoom tool. We put it out. Like I said, we made it free on the Zoom marketplace. And we got 10,000 users in the first 4.5 weeks. Like right in 1 month, we got 10,000 users. And we didn't have a marketing budget. And then the next month we added a little bit more than that again. So we just started like this huge increase of tens of thousands of users just signing on to our platform. And the street cred from that and the viability that we showed and the insights, and then just sort of the organic viral growth that happens because of that, meant that a lot of the phone calls we'd been having and a lot of the deals we were trying to create turned back on. And then all of a sudden people were calling us, and then we could have better conversations with people where we could say, hey, have a 15-minute Zoom call with me, and then I'm just going to send you the report the AI says about you. And if you think it's right, we can do business together. And if you don't think it's right, then who cares? And just that generated all sorts of, it filled the pipeline and it filled the funnel back up is where we are. So we are now at a space where we can start working with, we've processed enough data that we can start working with like Team Crisis that has humans in the loop. So we can give information to a human to help them in those critical conversations, but our system is staying far away from trying to do it itself. So that's where we are.
Yeah. So your ultimate Super Bowl with this, Scott, what does that look like?
The ultimate goal for this is a therapist on every phone in America that doesn't data mine anybody, that doesn't sell the data to advertisers or do anything like that. It's egoless, which I think is a really important thing because, I've been a clinician. I've run a private practice. I've done that work. And so I've sat across from people who need help, and I've sat across from people who need a lot of help. And I know what it's like to be sitting across from a person and trying to do my best to pay attention and not doing 100% because my head is distracted by my memories of previous conversations with them and trying to compare now to then, or my imagination of the story they're telling me and my interpretation of that, or my assessment of, oh my gosh, I've only got 15 minutes till my next client gets here and this is important. How do I move this along well? Or I'm hungry, or any number of human things. And so if we could build a digital agent, a chatbot, let's call it, but better than that, but a chatbot that remembers everything you've ever said to it and can analyze and perfectly score how you're doing and compare that to all the other ways you've ever been. And we'll always try to figure out how to help you be a little bit better today and a little bit better over the long term, and optimize for your mental and emotional states so that you can talk to it for 2 minutes in between classes if you're in high school, or you could talk to it for 3 hours at 10 p.m. if you're feeling lonely or isolated, or whatever the need is of that person. Because right now, mental health care in America specifically there's no reasonable person who thinks it's going well, right? Like there is such a huge need with, giant percentages of the population suffering without access to quality care. And so if we could, whether it's logistical or socioeconomic or cultural or just the stigma, whatever it is that's stopping a person from going and getting that help, they could download an app, put it on their phone, no one knows they're doing it, and they could talk or text to that tool that is, very personal and hyper personalized and very much theirs. And we can build that. And one of the reasons I'm doing all this commercial stuff is because it pays, and we can make so much money for these companies that they've got to pay us well. And so we can take all the money from that and just create this opportunity to fund this social good side of it. So we'd be like a dual impact company, not a charity, not a 501c3, just something that uses its profits wisely to help humans.
Oh, fantastic. Now, you did mention something earlier about the fact that you guys are going to be entering into a new fundraising stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're just doing that now. So we had raised some money early on in a friends and family round, a pretty early stage, small round. Entrepreneur Magazine, or Entrepreneur Media, I guess, they came in as our lead investor, which was awesome, and has helped us obviously a lot. And so now we're looking at raising more money to grow this thing based on the traction that we had. That round was based on drawings on a whiteboard, and this round is based on real world results and numbers that support our validity.
And a clear demand for it, Scott. There's no question, and especially given now. Yeah, this is fantastic.
Yeah, it's I hesitate to say this, but we are one of those companies that actually benefits from COVID, and that may sound callous or insensitive to the many companies and individuals who have been impacted in so many ways by this. And we are one of the ones that was lucky in our positioning, and we were early enough that we could pivot, and we pivoted to something smart. So a little bit of luck, a little bit of hard work, and now we're in a spot that's better because of COVID. And we think people see that.
That's true. And so many eyes are on this issue, Scott. Really, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, and obviously your passion, and you're truly inspired, and we feel inspired by what you're doing as well. Thank you very much for spending the time with us today, and thanks for this demonstration. We really appreciate this.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right, Scott, so we have some questions for you. By the way, congratulations on having such incredible success.
Thank you.
With your company, certainly early on, and we're excited to see what's next for sure.
Yeah, we are definitely early on, but it's one of those things where it takes a couple years to become an overnight success. So we're doing the work.
We've heard that from many startups. In fact, I've heard a couple people say it took me 10 years to be an overnight success. Hopefully it won't take you that long. We've got a couple questions from folks who've been tuning in here. How would you keep such sensitive information safe and have it utilized for good only?
Yeah, it's I think the number one question is not the how can we do this, but how can we do this ethically? So number one, we don't care about any personal identifying information. We don't care about names, gender, ethnicity, all of those things that are personally identifying. Our system doesn't want, so we can tokenize those and delete those immediately. We can also run our system so that it intentionally jumbles and randomizes even the words in the conversations, and so we can change that because we're only storing the values of the scores, not necessarily the conversation itself. And so for those reasons, we can anonymize this pretty effectively, pretty fast.
Okay, because that's a big thing on people's minds, of course.
Sure.
And I know from a sales and marketing perspective, obviously we care about that, but it's not as critical as it would be in a clinical setting.
No, data privacy is, first and foremost. My background, like I said, was as a clinician. So, I think about HIPAA in everything we're doing.
Good.
Yeah, confidentiality matters. You have to be able to trust this. And our goal, obviously, like I said over and over, is to do the AI therapist thing. And in order to do that, we need to prove trust. And so what we're doing now isn't just proving efficacy, we're proving trust.
How are you doing that? I mean, that's a really interesting point. How are you proving trust at this stage?
I mean, really all we're doing is putting things together so that when we are called out and when we are audited, we'll be correct. And we'll have been doing it the right way all along. But no one's checking our work right now. So we just have to do it right so that when someone does, they're satisfied.
So when you're getting audited, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We have another interesting question, and it kind of occurred to me when we talked as well. If you had the same word, how are you differentiating that? For example, I left the party and took a left turn.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways. One is parts of speech. So if it's a verb or a noun or an adjective, that does parts of it. And the other part is context. So there's a bunch of different AI things that you can do that solve for that, but it's tricky.
Interesting. Okay. And has that been something that you guys have had to work through,
Quite a bit.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Okay. Another one of our viewers had mentioned that he participated in an AI hackathon with you in July, where they were working on a prototype of a similar solution using words and semantics from Twitter feeds, I guess. Mm-hmm. And they got stuck at the how to commercialize it. And, his comment or her comment was, it seems like you've got a great way to get in. We open source the solution with a hack in case you're interested in seeing this. Are you looking to connect with other folks who are building on this space?
Integrations and partnerships. If that person's got some cool stuff, we've done some stuff with Twitter as well now, but I would love to have that conversation. They can reach out to me, scott@cyrano.ai. I'm very receptive.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll make sure that person gets that information. How are you measuring the ethics involved in the use of this technology, Scott?
I mean, ethics is a soft science, so measuring it is a tricky thing to do. But we went to the United Nations AI for Global Good primarily to talk with the AI ethicists there, and we spent a lot of time sitting in and having those long conversations about how to make sure we're doing this right, because it matters.
And just, I don't want to break any confidences, but out of curiosity, what kinds of questions were they asking, and where were they digging in a little deeper with you guys?
The crux of the whole thing is if we're building a robot that can increase or decrease the likelihood of a person doing something, and we want them to do healthy things, that robot could influence them to do unhealthy things. And so we need to figure out how we're optimizing those outcomes.
Okay. And that's something that I think is on a lot of our minds as we're thinking about this technology. There's so many positive things that we can do. There's so much AI for good, but the flip side is obviously the flip side, right? So we have to make sure that we have those guardrails in place for sure.
Yeah.
And we've got another person who's in the process of typing a question. We've got a gentleman named Van West. How you doing, Van?
How are you,
see
Van?
you.
Van is a friend of mine who's doing some great stuff with voice at a company called Vocalytics, and his company's doing awesome. And he and I are going to be partnering on a lot of stuff, I'm sure. I can't wait to see his question.
Oh, fantastic. Well, here it goes. You ready? He says, love what you're up to and the mindset and your approach. Astounding vision. What sectors are you focused on today and in the near term?
Sure. So right now we're really looking at sales. The big thing for us is making sure that we are connecting this to outcomes, and sales has very clear wins and losses. So we're doing that. And at the same time, actually in the last hour and a half, I've been on the phone with a hospitalist down in San Diego who's looking at plugging our stuff into telehealth and post-operative follow-up to make sure people are doing the care so they don't get rehospitalized.
Oh, perfect. And that's a big deal for hospitals, as you know. Compliance is a hard one for them to track and measure as well. Are you, because I know when we had talked, you had mentioned you still wanted to test the efficacy and make sure you were set in
And
a
I feel good about
non-pandemic
that.
space. But
Our
those who are
feedback is above 85%, and so I'm ready.
perfect. Oh, you're ready. Good. Okay. So if somebody who's watching from the healthcare space right now
Let's do
wanted
it.
to get their hands on your tech, great. Okay. So they know how to get in touch with you. Well, that's terrific. Well, listen, Scott, we're gonna set you aside for a few minutes here. We're gonna talk to you in a little bit, but we're going to spend a few minutes now with Daniel Akiva of Cloud Verga, and then we'll all conclude together. So thanks for spending some time with us, and we'll see you in a few.
Perfect.
Joining us now is Daniel Akiva. He is the Chief Technology Officer and co-CEO of Cloud Verga.
Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to share and showcase what we're doing from an AI perspective.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And I'll tell you, we've been excited about this ever since you and I talked last week. I've been talking to people in the mortgage industry. I don't want to jump ahead too far, but tell us a little bit about you guys. What do you do and what's behind Cloud Verga?
Yeah, the core premise with Cloud Verga is really providing a better overall experience to our borrowers, to our loan officers, and to our mortgage brokers. What we've found over the years is essentially a fragmented experience, a large part due to the lack of technology, lack of investment, and just fragmented tooling that lenders sort of invest in, and ultimately that negatively impacts the loan officer's ability to really understand the entire origination process end to end and what tools they need to be using. And then that ultimately negatively impacts the borrower experience as well. I think a lot of us have gone through the mortgage process, know the pains and having to assemble documents and scan documents and take photographs of documents and either email them or fax them and then get on phone calls with our loan officers, which ultimately I think it is a subpar experience, and it's actually a costly experience. So we're really excited to provide our experience, which encompasses essentially the entire loan origination experience.
So, I mean, so to that point, Daniel, so a typical experience, and I've done one recently myself where, you get an email from somebody, any number of people in the value chain, right? It's your loan officer, it's title, it's escrow. They're asking for documents. In fact, they're asking you to print something, manually fill it out, scan it, and then either email or fax it back to them. Whoa. Okay. What year are we in? Right. And so what you guys have done is you guys have come along and you've totally disrupted that space. Tell me a little bit more about the number of tools that are typical in this process and what you're doing to really alleviate that experience from, again, the borrower side, but also the folks on the origination side as well.
Sure. In fact, I just recently closed a loan with a large lender, and the loan officer shared with me that an entire origination process actually touches today 43 different systems. They're making some changes some large changes internally to bring it down to 9, which is still 8 systems too many. When we're thinking about the origination experience and using some of your great examples, borrowers should really go to one place. They should go to one portal. They should be able to fill out a form, and in fact, it should even be pre-filled a lot of the time. We can now automate the retrieval of bank statements. We have a term called day one certainty, which is really the ability for certain third-party vendors to be approved to automatically send over specific data sets so that the borrower doesn't even need to upload a document or even fill out ancillary information. It's just, okay, I'm going to connect my bank account, and the asset verification, everything happens automatically. Then on the loan officer side, similarly, not having to obtain that information, or when having to, going into one system, logging in, being able to see all the information that the borrower entered or pre-filled, and then also being able to go to one portal where they can understand exactly what's required in order to fully originate the loan. Does the borrower need to provide W-2s? Does the borrower need to provide other types of documents? And having one place where one can see that, I think helps streamline the process. And finally, the ability to notify the borrower aptly when any of these documents are required, and then giving the borrower a good experience. So for example, sending an email with a link that takes them right into a portal experience to upload a document, as opposed to having to email or scan or fax or print. It really helps provide a good streamlined experience between the loan officer and the borrower.
And to be honest, you're also cutting costs, because I joke whenever I looked at my loans and I would see all the fees and I'd say, okay, guys, so there's like $80 in here for copies and $100 for faxes. What are we talking about here? Tell us a little bit about the new experience that you've created. So we're talking about eliminating these 43 systems down to 9 for that one large lender. Where do you guys come in? How do you plug into what's currently in existence, and what does that look like now?
Sure. When you're thinking about the Cloud Verga platform, there's the visible experiences, but the heavy machinery really is on the back end. And in order to achieve the reduction in fragmented tooling for our lenders, we really had to think about how do we create basically a hub that automatically can bring together various third parties. So we're aggregating data, we're aggregating back-end experiences. So when we're thinking about, for example, running credit, the experience of running credit, the experience of bringing in mortgage insurance, the experience of running automated underwriting, bringing all of that into one hub that automatically manages all of that, and then ultimately provides the necessary feedback and information to our users, both borrowers and on the back end, the loan officers.
So this is considered an intelligent digital mortgage platform.
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about the intelligent piece.
Sure.
What makes you guys so smart, Daniel?
So yeah, let's definitely dig into that. So number one, determining whether or not the borrower has to order an appraisal. So bringing back, as part of our runs of AUS, there's the concept of getting a waiver. So when we're talking about reducing costs, well, if you've got a waiver, the experience shouldn't take the loan officer or the borrower into an appraisal scheduling experience. Now that can also save the borrower upwards of between $400 and $600 just to order an appraisal. And it can also reduce the amount of time that the loan is sitting and waiting. So when we're looking at costs and cost reduction, a big part of the reduction is being able to get through the origination experience faster, so that a loan is not sitting on the books waiting to be closed.
Oh, that's a big one. You talk about cost reduction, but also being able to churn more loans. That's huge. So what would that look like? I know I've heard that it's lightning fast to get something done in 30 days. Any idea of what time savings this would provide?
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about time savings, and you've got certain restrictions in purchases versus refis. But when we're looking at a refi, for example, there's no reason that we couldn't get that time down to probably 25% of what it is currently. So being able to close a refi in, say, a week's time, or even less than a week, where feasible, is really what we're aiming towards.
That's incredible. Wow, that really is a disruptor. And I know this industry itself has been, as we've talked about, really a trailing industry as it relates to technology. So looking ahead, Daniel, as you kind of look to your roadmap, I know you're the Chief Technology Officer as well as the co-CEO. What does the future look like? What are you planning for?
I think enhancements in underwriting. So we've tackled the experiences for borrowers and loan officers. Really, the question now becomes, how do we execute in a more intelligent fashion all of the rules needed to close a loan? And the question is, why not run some of those rules which are run sequentially today, which kind of has almost like a ping pong effect, where the loan matures through the origination process, then it goes to a separate department comes back and says, well, ran through our rules, go back and ask the borrower for these 4 things. Well, if we could have asked those questions right at the beginning of the loan, wouldn't that have been a more streamlined experience? So first, less disruptive for the borrower. Borrowers would be asked one time, hey, give us these pieces of information now. Great, it's done. We figure out how to automate where possible. But more importantly, that process happens only once. And then finally, when it gets to the underwriting phase becomes shortened because all of the rules that were executed during underwriting were executed up front and we're satisfied. So really where we're going is, how do we automate that function, if you will? And I think that's where really understanding our data, reflecting on the data, understanding the different sets of rules that could be triggered against the data, evolving those sets of rules and evolving them in a more automated fashion, which is where I think machine learning and AI come into play.
That's what I was going to ask you. You just beat me to the punch on that next question. So the AI piece of it now is kind of looking at that data set and truly automating that experience.
Well, let's think about this. If we took a set of rules and we brought it up to the forefront and we were able to satisfy those rules, and then in underwriting, an additional set of rules emerged. This is where the learning effect comes in, where you ran a series of rules. How do we get it to a perfect outcome the first time? And I think that's going to require some trial and error, some understanding of, what was the fallout of the execution of a rule, what was the benefit of a rule, what was a dependency, if there was a dependency chain with respect to rules that we didn't understand or that emerged, potentially as part of maybe some compliance change that occurred in the industry. Having some learning aspect that goes in and analyzes these ever-changing data sets to perfect the sets of rules that are run against the loan up front, I think will help achieve a better outcome.
That's a great point. I know that rules are changing daily, right? There's so much happening today that maybe wasn't even happening 6 months ago, what we've been dealing with recently. Where are you guys finding your lane, if you will, in this kind of new way of doing business? Because so much of this now is truly in front of the computer, like you and I are having this conversation today. You're not physically going into the loan office anymore. This is where the contactless piece comes in. How have you changed your model, or have you, in the last 6 months or so?
It's interesting because we actually look at this new world as almost like an accelerant to finishing off the digitizing of the mortgage experience, because it's now become basically a requirement. Well, back in March, April, it was very difficult to get an appraiser to come out to a home to appraise a home, just given the fact that rules around in-person contact were just being formed. So the mortgage industry basically said, well, we can't just stop, right? We have to be able to originate loans, especially with the historically low interest rates. Volumes were at all-time highs, and they continue to be at all-time highs. So it was really a forcing function to get us to think about, well, how do we look at this in a more digital experience and a contactless experience? Are there certain situations where maybe we don't need to do an appraisal? As kind of we talked about a little bit earlier. Are there lighter versions of an appraisal where maybe the appraiser doesn't have to enter the home and can perform the appraisal more quickly as a result, and with less friction and scheduling and that sort of thing? So I think we've looked at a variety of different areas in the mortgage process that were not fully digital, and kind of rethought, well, maybe they need to be now digitized in order to support the world that we're now in.
So are you interfacing directly with a lot of the lenders when you're having these conversations about making these changes to your technology as well?
We do. We interface directly with our lenders. Our primary customer is actually the lender. We have a series of retail lenders that utilize our platform, and we're growing our wholesale footprint now as well.
Okay. Talk about security for a little bit, Daniel. I know that's a big one because, again, the old way of doing things, as you alluded to, you would often, text your license to your lender, through the phone. Now we're talking about having this digitized portal, assuming it's highly secure. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it. When you're looking at a variety of means to get data to your loan officer, whether it's a fax, whether it's in the past, I've used my iPhone and taken photographs of pages of sensitive information and literally just sent them via an SMS over to the loan officer. If you're thinking about it, those conduits are not necessarily the most secure. And your data footprint now is ever expanding. Now you've got your social security number on some server that's hosting or storing SMS. You've got your footprint, being sent over a fax, your data being sent over a fax. Excuse me. What we're doing is by providing one platform, one experience. Number one, that experience, encompasses military grade encryption. So we do everything over SSL, secure channels. We store sensitive data in encrypted form. We manage all of data consistently across the entire loan process, which includes documents. We destroy data where it needs to be destroyed as well. Some data just doesn't need to be stored for long periods of time. While having it centrally managed and automated, we can actually go back and remove data sets that are no longer required. And of course, all of this is in tune with trying to reduce the potential for a breach and for the exposure of data in the event of a breach.
I mean, which is absolutely huge. I think you had said that typically the lenders have to hang on to the data for about 7 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are certain data sets for audit reasons that have to be held on to for a number of years. Now, our strategy there, we have multiple levels of encryption with respect to the storage of that data. So not only do we encrypt all of our SQL volumes, we encrypt field level in certain cases for PII. So for example, social security number is always stored in an encrypted form. So there are a lot of measures that we put in place to ensure that our data is appropriately isolated and stored. We're also.
I know there are opportunities. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say we're also ensure that we're up to date from a compliance perspective. We just recently completed our annual audit to ensure that our systems are up to date, our processes are current with respect to specific agency standards. So we're ISO compliant. We maintain SOC compliance as well.
Perfect. And I know if we were to kind of visually go through this process, right, from the borrower to the lender side, obviously there's a lot of data exchange happening. Really, it's really more one-sided from a sensitivity perspective. It's the borrower sending the sensitive information to the lender. How are you managing that piece of it? Is it effectively going from me to you to the lender? And then all of those kind of steps along the way are secure in unique ways?
Yeah, so when we think about data flow, it's a great question. It's going oftentimes either from a borrower, or if we're aggregating from a third party, it flows through into our systems. Ultimately, it flows into a lender system, all through secure channels. We work directly with our lenders when we're integrating to ensure that both sides, our side as well as the lender side, there's an agreement and an understanding as to how data is going to be transmitted between the systems, when the data is going to be transmitted, what specific data sets. And there are variations between our lenders. Some lenders may have a more strict security policy that we have to adhere to. In some cases, it's a little bit more lax. I think we have our own baseline, but ultimately we're also flexible enough to adhere to our lenders' security posture as well.
Okay. And so again, a lot of us kind of watching are going to be looking at this from a borrower perspective, or obviously a technologist perspective. How could we get your technology into our lenders?
Well, I think one is word of mouth when you're talking to your loan officer. As I spoke to my loan officer previously, asking questions around what systems they're using. Oftentimes, depending on the size of the lender and sophistication, you'll find that there's either less tooling or more tooling or fragmented experiences. So I think being sensitive to that and knowing that there are options out there, oftentimes you can encourage the lender as the borrower, giving them feedback that there is a better way to originate a loan out there that's both beneficial to that loan officer who's probably touching many systems, as well as to the borrower.
Okay, perfect. Daniel, any closing thoughts?
Well, I'm really excited about where we're headed as a company. Really excited to showcase our technology today. I think we're going to continue down this trend of digitizing the mortgage experience and optimizing the mortgage experience. I'm most excited about the inclusion of AI and machine learning to help us better, bring a lot of the rules, the execution of rules to the forefront to really improve that overall experience, bringing down the time it takes to go from the beginning of a loan origination to when the loan actually funds. So I think that's the last piece that we really need to solve. I'd love to be able to one day, go through a refi and find out within 3 days that it's funded. I think that is the experience that we need to drive towards. And that's what I'm most excited to be at the forefront of solving.
Well, I am too, and I'm very excited for you. Thank you so much, Daniel. We really appreciate you taking the time today. We know you've been incredibly busy, excuse me, but thank you again for spending time with us today. And on behalf of City AI, best of luck to you and your organization.
Thank you for having me.
Daniel, we're not done with you yet. Gosh darn it. You mentioned 3 days. That's the goal. I want to hear about the tech roadmap that you have, that you're ready to hatch on.
Well, I mean, it is a challenge, but we're building out as part of our platform play, the ability to expose specific APIs to send out documents to third parties to get what we call ADR, document recognition, so that we get data parsed out of documents, brought back into our system, a series of rules executed by prior to transit of that data as well. So yeah, we're doing a lot of interesting and innovative things in order to get data into our system faster, to optimize the rule sets that are executed. When you're thinking about rules, I know I talked a little bit about it, previously, but it's really an overlay, a mishmash of just as I learn it, you got core rules that you execute for a loan. Then you've got investor overlays that come in and say, what, if you want to sell this rule to Wells Fargo, it's got to meet this additional criteria. So now that gets overlaid. So there's a variety of very specific rule sets that need to be brought together. And then from there, our goal is to bring it up into the point of sale, so that we know upfront exactly what's needed. We try to get as much of that data as we can through automated means. When we talk about day one certainty, when we talk about being able to pull bank statements and things like that in automated form, being able to get that data automatically, trying not to disrupt or bother the borrower where possible. But then if we are going to make an ask, just come in and here's what we need.
Love that. And I'll tell you, I know we've had a couple of folks ask about, where does it reside? Are we talking about on-prem, in the cloud, combination?
We are entirely in the cloud. So all of our data is stored securely in AWS. All data, our experiences are also in AWS. So all of our UIs, all of our servers, our backups and everything are securely stored in the cloud.
It makes sense. That's where your primary customer is headed if they're not fully there anyway. So I know that your primary is the lender themselves. So that makes good sense. Mm-hmm. We had a question from somebody who asked, does this replace Point and other mortgage software?
We'd like to think so. Well,
there you go.
If you take Calyx Point, the way that we're actually thinking about wholesale is this. Oftentimes, brokers will use their own system in order to begin the origination process on behalf. They may work with multiple lenders. So our new TPO portal is more specific to a lender that is in wholesale. So if you're using Calyx Point, you have two options. Number one, you as a broker that may work for a lender can either use Point and then do an import of a 3.2 file directly into our system and then continue the origination process. Or you can originate directly inside of Cloud Verga. So
okay.
Supported.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we've got a few minutes left. I do want to pull our other speakers into the mix here. We've got Joseph, who we talked about a little bit earlier. Joseph, thanks for being here. Obviously, Scott and Al as well. Now, Joseph, you were the kind of the brain. This was your brainchild, this entire event, and the thesis of this was really talking about contactless AI in the context of what we're dealing with today. You had a couple questions for these speakers. Let's hear from you for a few minutes.
Yeah, is my sound coming through okay?
Yeah, you're perfect.
Oh, okay, very good. First of all, Sam, as always, nice job moderating. Love it, love it.
Thank you.
It's great. As I listened to Veritone, Al, and obviously Sereno, Scott, and then of course Daniel. By the way, Daniel, I love that background. Reminds me of the Northern Light. Whatever you did there, keep it going. I love that. Yeah. But in terms of your company, Cloud Virgo, it's kind of interesting. This all fits in terms of our original objective, right? It was all around identifying super smart tech companies driven by AI that is now trying to maneuver through these uncertain times, right? So we originally had that first series where we spoke about some of the ingredients that's required to make companies like you guys very successful. And I'm going to circle back and make sure each of you guys have a quick pen, because we'll take a couple minutes to hear from you on each of these things. And I'll circle back with you, just have a pen there to write something as I note. The second series we had, which I thought was really good as well, the three of us, the three ambassadors that Sam worked with here, Al, myself, and Martin Pressure, we highlighted four companies that really smart. We highlighted four smart tech companies that's really doing marvelous things. One was around this whole area around hoteling, which Al did. Martin highlighted one around the wearables technology. I did one around water conservation. And the fact that your water is getting somewhat short globally speaking. What do you do from a conservation perspective there? And then lastly, Martin also did one around wise IoT solutions. And then of course today, you guys I think did a really wonderful job in sort of capping off this series. And this is exactly what we want to do. We wanted to hear from the companies on the front lines doing what you're doing to make a difference. And obviously COVID hasn't made your lives any easier. And Scott talked about how you guys have had to, had an impact directly, probably in all of your businesses, but had an impact on your business, and you had to change some things. So I wanted to circle back really quickly and ask you each this question, because I want to sort of link this now to what our original objective was. So when you think about ingredients that make folks like yourself successful, smart tech, AI-driven companies, we had noted largely three areas where we thought companies like you would need to focus on to some degree to be successful. So one of those areas is around trust and privacy. So I'd like for each of you, if you don't mind, I'll highlight the three areas. So one's trust and privacy. The other is around convenience, safety, and security. So transaction done quickly, easily, as well as securely. And then of course, the last one was around smart tech and smart connectivity. So taking what you folks have from a product and services perspective and making that and offering that up to your customers, so it's complexity made simple, or complexity simplified, right? So I'm curious to hear quickly from each of you, because I know we're running short on time here. Just highlight, if you don't mind, maybe one of all three of those. Which of those things are you folks focusing on, and why do you think it's important to make your company successful? Just just each of you just take a couple, maybe like 1 minute each, if you don't mind.
I'll go first because we're all being polite, so I'll just do it because we're short on time. For trust and privacy, like I said, we're doing everything we can. And Daniel talked about some of the same stuff that we're doing in terms of encryption and AWS and all that too. There's that sort of minimum threshold we all have to hit. But audits and things like that, finding ways to prove to people that their data is secure with us and that we're going to do the right thing with it. I think people are well within their rights to be skeptical of tech companies who have their data. I think it was actually a really great thing that Andrew Yang brought that up in this election cycle. And I think it was a good thing to be brought up, nationally for all of us. So that's a piece for us. And then the other one, convenience. The idea of that, we found that when we were doing stuff in person, we had to change people's choreography a little bit to create an opportunity for our tech to do things. But actually, now that so much more is remote, the choreography of using our insights is invisible because it's just more information either in real time or asynchronously showing up on your screen, not having to pull out a phone or pull out a tablet to access that information. So for us, especially as everyone's becoming more and more virtual and remote, those two things are the easy ones for us.
Okay, great.
All right, so on my side, you have to be secure. You got to do all the table stakes people talked about. We focused on security. We support secure environments all the way up and through FedRAMP. So we've been doing that. What I focus on is really more the connectivity. How do we make it easy? How do we reduce friction so that all these systems can be plugged together where we can gain the insights from AI? So that's what we focus on.
Great. Thanks, Al.
For us, just talk about trust and privacy, briefly. And I'm just going to throw it out there. There's inherent distrust when it comes to mortgages, especially after 2008. So one of the things that when we're thinking about our platform, it's trust, privacy, but it's also regulations. So we get some of that defined for us, where it's like, okay, you want to go and get a document over here, say for example, a transcript of your tax returns. Well, wait a minute, make sure you disclose that to the user, to the borrower, and they have to actually sign off on it before it actually happens. So that you'll find in our experience, there are a lot of points where the borrower is notified that something is happening. The borrower actually has to consent that something is going to happen. And I think part of that is really to try to build that trust with the borrower. Mortgage is a very complicated process, and it's not always clear what's happening. So we're doing everything we can to ensure that the experience is something that helps the borrower understand what's happening, what's going to happen, what needs to happen in order to complete the process. And then finally, the security piece is paramount. Given the type of data that we're storing, we do store PII, we do transmit PII when we're talking to our lender systems. So ensuring that we have the utmost care, encryption, and everything that is standard, and ensuring that that type of data is appropriately handled.
Fantastic. Look, on that note, again, thanks, guys. Wonderful job today. Again, you're on the front lines, and thank you for making those key ingredients for success come to life. So congratulations on your business. Look, on behalf of that, City AI thanks you as well. Samantha, you want to take it?
And really, you just took the words out of my mouth, Joseph. Thank you, gentlemen, all of you, for all the incredible work you're doing in the AI space, in innovation in Orange County. If it wasn't for you, there would be no City AI Orange County. Really, there's nothing for us to talk about without real live stories, and some of the things that you're doing are really, really inspiring. So we really appreciate your time and your energy, and we hope that those of you who were able to join us today found this to be a very beneficial conversation for you and your business. And looking ahead, we are in the process of planning our next City AI Orange County event. Online at the moment. If we can do something in person, we certainly will let you know, but we're looking at the healthcare space. So that should be very exciting as well. Once again, thank you all very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.